Good day. My name is Norman Pappous. I'm here with Sam Collins, and you are watching Meet in the Middle Chronicles. Today's guest is a candidate for District 7 State Board of Education, Dr. Eliz Markowitz. And before you wonder, we've asked, no relation to the famous economist. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
Doing well. How are y'all?
Doing great. First, we would like to understand the district that you're running for geographically. Could you please tell the viewers, what area this encompasses?
Absolutely. So District 7 for the State Board of Education encompasses a large portion of Southeast Texas, including Brazoria, Chambers, Fort Bend, Galveston, Hardin, Jasper, Jefferson, Liberty, Newton, Orange, Sabine, San Augustine, and Tyler counties. So we have 13 counties. Technically 12.75 because we don't have a bit of Fort Bend, but we cover all of Southeast Texas.
And you're going to do all that for no pay.
All that for no pay. This is a volunteer position.
That is the first thing that will disqualify you from good judgment, is working that hard for no pay.
But we're working for the greater good, right?
True, absolutely.
We have a set of questions here that we'd like to start our interviews off with. If it's something that you want to come back to, a lot of times it's yes or no, but we have a few questions here that you will be able to expand on. So, ready?
I'm so ready.
All right. Dr. Markowitz, why have you not pursued office at the local level? Why not participate on a local ISD board for a few years before attempting to run for an office that is essentially statewide, as you just described?
You make a very good point. I get asked this a lot. So why are you just jumping straight into the state level position? The truth of the matter is that in 2017, I graduated with my doctorate in curriculum and instruction. And after that, I was pursuing a professorship position at various universities when I realized that there would be nobody else running against Dr. Matt Robinson, who is my opponent for the State Board of Education, and who has said that if you were satisfied with David Bradley's positions, who is the current individual who holds the State Board of Education seat, that you would be satisfied with his election. And so I realized that nobody else was going to step up, and if nobody was going to step up, then I could do that. And I believe that we can make a change.
Well, before we get into the rest of the questions, let's give a little more background there about yourself, if you want to tell your degrees and your bio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's very impressive, we have to admit. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It just means I spent a lot of time in a classroom, but that's okay.
And you did well. You did well.
Whew. Yeah. After graduating from Taylor High School in Fort Bend, one of the counties in SBOE District 7, I attended Trinity University and received my bachelor's degree, dual degree in computer science and studio art, trying to mix up the creative with the scientific. And at that point, I also started working for the Southwest School of Art and Craft and the Princeton Review as an educator. So at Southwest School of Art and Craft, I was a mobile artist, and we went to various underprivileged schools that couldn't afford to have arts programs, and we got to work with children in underserved communities to bring arts into their schools.
Let's stick with the Princeton Review.
Okay.
Because anybody who has, applied to college or taken a standardized test, is familiar with the words Princeton Review, and it strikes terror in all of us.
Or joy.
Or terror.
Or terror.
So you served in that capacity for 8 years.
13 years, actually.
13 years.
Yes,
Okay.
since 2005.
Testing is a big deal in public education.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a hot topic, and people have a lot of viewpoints on its efficacy, on what it tells educators, and also just in general the stress levels that it puts kids under. Yes. So what I'd like you to do is address what you think the key issues are for testing with teachers. You hear teachers saying that, no, we don't want testing. We want minimal testing. We're teaching to the test. How accurate are these criticisms, and what is your response?
I believe these criticisms are extremely accurate. I believe that standardized testing is the root cause for the majority of our issues in the public education system. Standardized testing is an invalid and unreliable metric of student aptitude and achievement because it doesn't promote critical thinking skills, and students just regurgitate information. There's no elaboration upon any concepts, and these tests are created based on the curriculum standards, or the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills Standards. So we base our tests on our curriculum, and then our teachers are taught to that curriculum, which is focused on a standardized test, and their performance evaluations are also based on testing outcomes, as are student evaluations, and so everything comes back to the standardized testing. And if we could eliminate high-stakes standardized testing from the public school system, our students would be much better off because they wouldn't have this anxiety, as you mentioned, or this fear of not being able to achieve something that doesn't matter. They might have a love for school because instead of learning how to bubble in A, B, C, or D, they are learning practical skills and knowledge that they can utilize in the real world.
So do you think that that will be a minority view on the state board?
It depends on how this election goes. There are 15 members on the State Board of Education currently. There are about 5 who are more liberal in their views and want to reform the curriculum and reduce standardized testing and improve teacher quality. And there are a number of SBOE, State Board of Education district positions that are up for election this cycle. So if we can get 3 positions, which would hopefully be District 7, and then Aisha Davis and Carla Morton up in Dallas area, then we would have an 8-person majority and we could actually make some changes.
Okay. So if I might follow up with one question in the testing area. So how do you address school ISD boards, those elected at the local level, who say, well, then how are we supposed to judge the efficacy of how the administration executes the objectives we give them?
I believe it all comes down to trusting our teachers again. So we've taken all the power out from the educators, and we've said that this arbitrary standardized test really has the power.
So what are you going to replace it with? Because people, boards need a metric in order to say,
of course,
you've done great, you deserve a raise. And in Galveston, some of our schools did phenomenal, so the superintendent got a big raise, as was warranted due to the performance. So what tool are you going to replace the testing with?
So I believe that we can have a series of subjective tests that are created so students are able to actually write critical essays of thought, and those can be evaluated by the individual teachers, and then based on a rubric, of course, and then they will have something that shows students can think outside of bubbling. We could also have a portfolio evaluation where we have student work over a period of 6 months per semester, and that student work is evaluated against our curriculum standards. And if the student has exceeded expectations, then we know that that's beneficial. If student has not exceeded expectations, and that's a trend throughout a classroom, then we know that that teacher is in need of some professional development. But to say that a teacher excels or a student excels simply because of a standardized test score is a falsehood.
And just to piggyback on your Princeton review, I had my oldest daughter went through a program, and she did very well on the SAT after taking it. Her and my 18-year-old are very competitive. She's 22, he's 18. So he's always following his sister. He had 2 older sisters, but this one. And she beat him by 90 points. He didn't take Princeton review, she did. So that's a plug for the Princeton review.
Go Princeton review.
Go Princeton review. That it does make a difference.
It does, and the problem though is that it's not teaching content knowledge. Yeah. It's test-taking skills. Yeah. I actually wrote my dissertation on this, and what I did is I had different control groups, right? I had a couple classes that we taught content review for an hour and a half, and then we had a couple classes that we did test-taking skills for an hour and a half, and then they both took the same exact exams, pre and post-test, and afterwards the score increases for the test-taking group was 600% higher than the content group. Which just goes to show that that's not testing
It's just
knowledge.
mastering the test.
It's just knowing how to take a
Yeah,
test.
not falling in the potholes. Well,
Right.
back to our question. If elected, what will be your first initiative with regards to school curriculums, and what will be your inaugural piece of policy that you want TEA to adopt?
These are great questions. There's so many things. It's hard to limit it to one. But I do believe that by far the most important thing we can do for our students is reform the Texas curriculum. In particular, the history curriculum, the science curriculum, they're in need of dire reform because we have essentially incorporated revisionist history and falsehoods into these curricula in the sense that the U.S. history curriculum for 7th and 8th grade now says that the Civil War occurred due to states' rights and tariffs as opposed to slavery being the main problem. And I'm sorry, but that is just completely invalid, and we are misleading 12% of the country because that's how much of the nation is in Texas K through 12 public schools. And not only is that a problem for Texas, but oftentimes the textbooks that Texas adopts are adopted by other states in the country.
Sure, because Texas has
So
the
goes
purchasing
Texas.
power.
Exactly.
So goes Texas, so goes the nation.
There you go. So it's not just a problem for my district or the state. It's a nationwide problem that must be addressed because we're falsely educating our students.
Well, I serve on the board with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and part of the what we're working on now is telling the full history. And we just recently did an interview with a gentleman in the Sugar Land area at Fort Bend ISD building a new school, and they hit these 95 bodies that were part of the convict leasing. But that part of history has not been taught, and a lot of people don't know what happened immediately following the Civil War, passing of the 13th Amendment. So to your point about how the narrative has been changed, or the revisionist history is put in place to kind of soften what happened, I think it's right on point. So that was one of the things, the inaugural piece of policy that you think you would.
Inaugural piece of policy, I don't know if
You
this...
want them to adopt.
I would like it to be adopted that textbooks and materials must be approved by subject matter experts. I believe that having a 15-member board, many of whom have no education background, determining the textbooks and materials for the entire state and this country is problematic. So I believe that we need to have some sort of legislation or policy that provides oversight for that.
That's oversight of the board to, how are you going to adopt? I mean, they have been doing it. If you don't know the subject,
Right.
I loved math in school, so that was me. I didn't like some of the other subjects, but if that was something regarding that area of expertise, I would have. Of course, I would want to have an opinion there. So to your point, the board, if they don't know, voting on something that you have little knowledge on. It happens,
does.
but I think that's an excellent point. Having some subject experts.
Yeah, it is an excellent point. And I think a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times you have two parties that are arguing against each other, specifically on this topic. And the thing is, they're both right and they're both wrong. Their answers, neither of their answers are as complete as they should be to fill out the entire, picture of what you want to present. And I see that, I see that a lot where people are arguing, for a certain view of history, and they're right, but it's not complete. And they're arguing for a certain view of history, and they're right, but it's not complete, and it's not in context. But moving on, In your role, there is one thing that, especially coming from South Galveston County, that we pay a lot of attention to, and we have a high percentage of economically disadvantaged children down here. Kind of the opposite of what you have up in Katy, where you're from.
Right.
Or actually even from, I think, Dr. Robinson and Friendswood ISD.
Correct.
So a lot of people here are going to be wanting to know how you plan to address the needs of economically disadvantaged children, simply because everybody agrees. I mean, everybody on both sides of the aisle agree that you have to spend more money on economically disadvantaged children. And if you do that, they learn at the same rate as non-economically disadvantaged children. You just have to spend some more resources on them. Especially not just in the classrooms, but during the summer months, where they don't have access to teaching and learning tools and that kind of thing. So if you're speaking to the parents of kids who are economically disadvantaged, how are you going to help their children achieve their potential?
So there's no easy answer to that question, but there are things that we can do to improve the situation. For example, the Permanent School Fund, which we discussed amongst ourselves earlier, does distribute money to school districts, but it is based on attendance. Now, one thing that we know from studies is that individuals who are in more of a lower socioeconomic area tend to have higher absentee rates because they have to take care of children, their family members, they have to have a job, and so they may not have the same attendance records. And then we're taking money away based on that. So we're saying, hey, we understand that you're in a rough situation. So not only are you in a rough situation, but we're going to make it even rougher by not giving you the resources. And that's kind of a tragedy. So we need to make sure that we're not doing something like that. We also need to ensure that we have enrichment programs for these students. So one of the things that the State Board of Education does is it works on extracurricular activities. And so we need to provide those activities to these disadvantaged students so they have the opportunity to succeed and to learn. In much the way that there are these Upward Bound or Head Start programs,
So
we need to implement
the short answer, the kind of the, what do you call it, the soundbite answer, is that you would like to change the fund that we were talking about that has about $40 billion in it net, and they give out a few billion every year. You would like to change the distribution of that from attendance-based to socioeconomic based.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I believe that that's imperative to the success of our society. We can't give individuals who are already at an advantage more of an advantage while we're not helping those of a lower economic status. And so we have to provide to give the same opportunities to all our students. And if that means distributing funding based on socioeconomic status of the district or the ISD or the school, then that's something we need to do. It's also something that the Texas legislature needs to work on as well. Get that $5.4 billion in the rainy day fund and put it back into our schools.
I think you'll find a lot of support for that everywhere. But we're going to end this segment with Dr. Eliz Markowitz, and we'll be back day after tomorrow for the next segment. And you can follow us, Meet in the Middle Chronicles, on Facebook, and we'll alert you as to when the next segment is due to broadcast. Thanks for watching.